The listening post drifted in the silent dark, a lonely outpost far beyond the edge of the known colonies. It had been built to listen for threats, alien fleets, unknown signals, cosmic dangers, anything that could give the Human Federation time to prepare. It was never supposed to hear Earth itself. Technician Mara Vance sat in the cramped control room, sipping cold coffee and staring at a wall of blinking monitors. It was the night shift, though night meant nothing here, where the stars never moved, and the only light came from the control panels. She had not expected anything unusual. The station's logs had been empty for weeks. Most days they picked up only faint echoes of colony transmissions or stray background radiation. Then it came. At first she thought it was interference, a sharp crackle in the comms like static. She adjusted the filters, trying to clean the signal, but the sound came again, stronger this time, and beneath it she heard a voice. Her heart froze. It was human. She tapped the console, pulling the waveform onto the main display. The system identified the origin point instantly. Earth. Her mouth went dry. That was impossible. No direct transmission from Earth had reached this far in decades. Even if someone sent one now, it would take months to travel at light speed. Yet this signal had arrived instantly. The voice was low, steady, and cold. It spoke in Standard Terran, the official human language. To all human fleets, we will endure, do not return, ever. Then silence. Mara sat there, staring at the empty screen. Her fingers hovered over the comms panel. Part of her wanted to replay the message, just to make sure she had heard it right. Another part of her wished she had never heard it at all. The voice had not sounded desperate. It had not sounded afraid. It had sounded final. 3 days later, the Ninth Fleet received the message. The Ninth Fleet was the pride of the Human Federation Navy, 12 massive warships, each bristling, with weapons powerful enough to tear moons apart. They had been deep in the Perseus frontier, weeks away from the nearest human settlement, hunting down the last remnants of a hostile alien raiding force. For months, they had been chasing whispers of the enemy across uncharted systems. Their mission was almost complete. When the transmission came through, the fleet was in mid-jump. The message reached Admiral Elias Kane first. Kane was a tall, broad man with silver hair and a gaze like polished steel. He had been in the Navy for 30 years, fought in more campaigns than most captains could name, and had a reputation for never hesitating. But when he played the message, he hesitated. The words were the same as Mara had heard. To all human fleets, we will endure. Do not return. Ever. The voice. Kane recognized it. It was President Marlowe of the Human Federation. But there was something wrong. Marlowe's speeches were always warm, full of fire and resolve. This was cold, empty, like a man speaking from the bottom of the ocean. Kane called an emergency council of his captains. They gathered in the fleet's secure hollow chamber, 12 shimmering figures projected from across the ships. Each wore the same, uneasy expression. "Where exactly did this come from?" asked Captain Rhea Song of the Vigilant. Her voice was tight, controlled. "We haven't had direct Earth contact in months." "It came from Earth," Kane said flatly. "No relays, no bounce stations. A direct point source transmission, faster than light." "That's impossible," muttered Captain Armin Holt of the Resolute. "Earth doesn't have instant comms tech." "Not according to our records," Kane said. "But the signals, clean, no distortion, no sign of relay interference. It came straight from the homeworld." "What does it mean?" asked Captain Sato of the Iron Wind. "We will endure? Do not return? Is this some kind of code?" Kane shook his head. "No, I've read every emergency protocol we have. There's no scenario where Earth orders all fleets not to return. Ever." The room fell silent. In that silence, the thought crept into every mind, though none spoke it aloud. Something had happened to Earth. Something big enough, dangerous enough, that the president himself was warning all of humanity to stay away. Back in his private quarters, Kane replayed the message alone. He studied every syllable, every pause. Something in the background caught his attention. Not static, not interference. A faint rhythm, like a slow, deep heartbeat. He increased the volume, filtering out the voice. The sound became clearer. Thump, thump, thump. Steady, patient, endless. It was not mechanical. Kane shut the file and leaned back in his chair. His mind raced. He had fought alien warlords, synthetic uprisings, and pirate fleets, but this was different. The message had not told them to prepare. It had not asked for help. It had told them to stay away, which meant that whatever was on Earth now was not afraid of them. The next morning, Kane stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, the flagship of the Ninth Fleet. The stars drifted lazily beyond the viewport, beautiful and indifferent. He gave the order. Set course for Sol. There was a pause. His bridge officers exchanged quick, uneasy glances. Lieutenant Arlo, his navigation officer, finally spoke. "Sir, the message." "I know what the message said," Kane interrupted, "but Earth is our home. Our families are there. I will not sit out here in the dark while something happens to them." "Yes, sir," Arlo said quietly, and turned to his station. The course was plotted. Engines roared to life. The Ninth Fleet began its long journey home. The first signs came only a day later. The fleet's deep-range scanners picked up faint energy readings trailing them. At first, the readings seemed like debris, small, irregular, harmless. But the readings stayed with them, keeping distance, always just beyond visual range. By the third day, the readings had multiplied. Whatever was following them, there were dozens now. In the mess hall of the Vigilant, crew members whispered over their rations. "You think it's the Raiders?" one asked. "No," another replied. "The Raiders are dead. We saw to that." "Then what is it?" Nobody had an answer. Kane knew one thing. The fleet was being watched. He ordered increased patrols. Gun crews stayed at their stations, eyes locked on the void. Fighter wings launched in pairs, sweeping the edges of sensor range. They found nothing. But the readings stayed. 6 days into the journey, the fleet passed through an uncharted nebula. For several hours, the swirling gases blocked their sensors. When they emerged, the readings were gone. The crew relaxed. Some even laughed, shaking their heads at their own nerves. That night, the message came again. It came through every channel at once, command lines, private comms, even the ship's entertainment feeds. The same cold voice, the same final warning. "We will endure. Do not return, ever." This time there was no mistaking it. The heartbeat sound in the background was louder, slower, as if whatever made it knew they were coming. Kane did. Not call the captains this time. He did not explain. He simply gave the order to keep going. Whatever waited for them on Earth, he needed to see it with his own eyes. Far ahead, hidden in the black, the solar system waited in silence. The Ninth Fleet slowed as they reached the edge of the solar system. The first thing they noticed was the silence. No beacons, no navigation signals, no chatter from orbital stations. Space was empty. Normally, this far out, the fleet would have been welcomed by a flood of transmissions. Greetings from the outer defense stations, automated updates from Mars, signals from the belt colonies. Now there was nothing but static. Admiral Kane stood on the Vanguard's bridge, staring at the blank sensor screens. "Confirm the network," he ordered. The comms officer worked quickly, cycling through channels. One by one, the screens showed the same thing. No response. "Sir," the officer said finally, "all major relay stations are dark." The fleet moved inward, past the orbit of Neptune. Long-range scans showed the outer colonies, dead. Neptune's refueling outpost was cold and empty. Pluto's research station had no power. Even the small mining platforms in the Kuiper Belt were drifting without crew. It was as if every human presence in the system had been erased. They passed. Saturn next. The great gas giant swirled in its eternal storms, its rings glowing faintly in the sunlight. Normally, this would have been one of the busiest points in the system, with transport ships moving between Titan, Enceladus, and the gas refineries. Now there were no ships. Titan's docking bays were sealed. No lights burned on its surface. A low unease settled over the fleet. The crews whispered to each other in the corridors. The question was always the same. Where is everyone? When they reached Jupiter, they saw the first sign of something unnatural. The massive orbital station Haven Spire hung above the planet's clouds, its structure intact but lifeless. Its docking arms were extended, holding 3 ships that looked wrong. They were not human designs. They were smooth, black, and organic in shape, like shells of some deep-sea creature. They did not move. They did not answer hails. Scan. Them, Kane ordered. The scans came back strange. The ships were made of metal, but they gave off no heat, no life signs, no energy readings. They were dead. And yet, every officer who looked at them had the same feeling. Those ships were watching. The fleet moved on. By the time they reached Mars, the tension was almost unbearable. Mars was the crown jewel of human colonization. Vast cities. Under protective domes, millions of people living and working under the red sky. Now the domes were intact, but inside, nothing moved. No traffic, no lights. The cities were like frozen photographs. "We're reading breathable atmosphere inside," reported the science officer. "But no biological life, not even plants." "How? Is that possible?" Captain Song asked over the fleet channel. "Even if people left, the crops should still be alive." Kane didn't answer. He just stared at the red planet as they passed. Finally, Earth came into view. At first, it looked normal. Beautiful blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. From orbit, nothing seemed wrong. But there were no transmissions. No defense grid activity. No traffic in orbit. The moon was the same. Its mining bases were silent. Its shipyards stood empty. The fleet slowed and took up a holding position above Earth. Kane stood at the viewport, his hands behind his back. "Send drones," he ordered. Dozens of small reconnaissance craft launched from the fleet, streaking, down through the atmosphere. The crew watched their camera feeds as they descended. They showed cities that were whole, but empty. New York's streets were filled with cars that had stopped mid-traffic. Shops were open, shelves full. Food sat on plates in restaurants. But there were no people. Not one. Then, one by one, the drone feeds began to cut out. In Tokyo, a drone's camera flickered as it passed between 2 tall buildings. A shadow moved across the street, something too fast to see clearly. The feed went black. In Cairo, a drone scanned an empty market square. The air was still. Then, for a second, the sound of a slow heartbeat came through the audio before the signal died. In Paris, the drone showed a park where birds should have been flying. There was no movement, no wind, no sound at all. The image froze, and the drone was gone. Within an hour, every drone had vanished. No wreckage, no interference trace, just silence. On the bridge, the crew sat in tense quiet. "What now?" Captain Holt asked. Kane's face was hard. "We go down." The Vanguard's landing bay roared with activity as drop ships prepared for launch. Marines strapped into their seats. Engineers checked scanners and drones. Everyone moved quickly, but the air was heavy with fear. No one knew what they were walking into. Admiral Kane stood at the edge of the bay, watching his teams board. They were the best soldiers and explorers humanity had. Yet even they avoided his eyes. Orders were orders. but no one wanted to set foot on the silent earth. "Stay sharp," Kane said over the comm. "Report every detail. If you lose signal, retreat immediately." The first wave of dropships burned through the atmosphere, leaving bright streaks in the sky. They split into 3 groups, one for New York, one for London, one for Tokyo. The crews on the fleet's bridges watched their helmet cameras as the ships descended. New York came into view first. From the air, it looked exactly as it had. In the old days, tall towers, endless streets, sunlight glinting off glass. But the streets were frozen in time. Cars sat at strange angles, some with doors open, others with headlights still on. The Marines landed in Times Square. The huge screens were still playing advertisements, though the sound was gone. A cup of coffee sat on a table outside a cafe, steam still rising as if it had just been poured. But there was no one to drink it. "Reading no human life signs," the squad leader reported. "No animals either. Not even insects." London was the same. The River Thames flowed quietly under the bridges, but there were no boats. Big Ben's clock still ticked, though no one was there to hear it. A bus had stopped in the middle of a road, its doors open. The Marines stepped inside. The seats were full of bags, coats, and shopping parcels. But every seat was empty. The air smelled faintly of perfume and diesel. It felt like everyone had stood up and vanished in the same instant. Tokyo looked untouched. Neon signs glowed in the daylight. Storefronts displayed fresh food behind glass. A train sat at a station platform with its doors open, music still playing. Through the speakers. No passengers, no driver. Nothing moved except the slow drifting of dust in the sunlight. One Marine bent down and picked up a child's toy from the ground. It was warm, as if someone had been holding it moments ago. The reports came in, and Kane felt his stomach tighten. 3 cities, 3 different continents, all perfectly intact, but lifeless. It was not war. It was not disease. It was as if the entire population of Earth had simply disappeared. "Admiral," a voice came through from the New York team. "We may have something—" The rest of the transmission dissolved into static. Kane leaned forward. "Team New York, say again." The video feed from their helmets flickered. For half a second, the screen showed a dark figure standing at the end of the street. It was tall, too thin, its shape wrong for a human. Then the image cut out completely, in London. A Marine's helmet camera suddenly spun sideways. There was shouting, the sound of weapons being armed, and then silence. Their comms went dead. In Tokyo, the Marines saw movement inside a nearby alley. 2 soldiers went to check. They never came back. The rest of the squad began to retreat to the dropship, but before they could reach it, the video feed froze on a frame of empty sky and then vanished. On the Vanguard's bridge, the crew sat in shocked silence. All 3 landing teams were gone. No bodies, no signs of a fight, just gone. Kane's hands tightened on the edge of the console. The heartbeat sound, the same one from the message, began to echo faintly through the ship's comms. No one had transmitted it. It was just there. Somewhere on Earth, something was alive, and it knew they were here. The Vanguard's bridge was silent except for the soft hum of the systems. No one spoke. The loss of the 3 landing teams hung over the crew like a weight. Every officer was staring at the empty screens where the helmet feeds used to be. It was as if the Marines had never existed. Then the comms officer looked up. "Sir, we're picking up something." Admiral Kane stepped forward. "What kind of something?" The officer's fingers danced over the console. "It's a signal. Very faint. Very strange. It's coming from Earth, but not from any city or known installation." He hesitated, his voice tight. "It's coming from deep underground." "Location?" Kane asked. The officer brought up a holographic map. A red marker appeared in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's under the ocean floor, about 8 miles down. Kane frowned. There's nothing there. No base, no research station, the sea. Officer didn't answer. He simply turned up the volume. The bridge filled with a low, distorted whisper. It wasn't just random noise. There were words buried in it. Broken words, human words, and then the crew froze. The voice spoke their names, one by one, in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The whisper called out the names of people standing on the bridge. It even said Kane's name. The crew looked at each other, their faces pale. The whisper continued, over and over, as if it knew exactly who was listening. Kane leaned over the console. "Is this a recording?" The comms officer shook his head. "No, sir. It's real time. It's speaking to us." The signal grew louder. Beneath the words, Kane heard it again. The heartbeat. It was slower now, but deeper. The sound didn't come from the speakers alone. It felt like it was inside. The walls inside their chests. That night, the dreams began. Crew members reported seeing visions while they slept. In the dreams, they stood on a beach under a black sky. The ocean was endless and still, as dark as oil. Something huge moved beneath the surface, watching them. It whispered to them in voices of loved ones they had lost. And every time, the dream ended with the same image. The earth breaking open like an egg and the black ocean spilling into the stars. In the morning, Kane called a meeting of his senior officers. "This thing knows we're here," Kane said, his voice low. "It knows our names, and it wants us to come to it." Captain Song spoke first. "If it's underground, how is it transmitting?" "No idea," Kane replied. "But whatever it is, it has technology, or abilities, far beyond ours, Captain." Holt crossed his arms. "Sir, with all respect, maybe we should listen to the warning. Maybe we should leave." Kane shook his head. "I can't leave without knowing what happened to our people. We're going down there. We'll find this signal, and we'll find the truth." The room fell silent. Everyone knew this was the point of no return. Within hours, the Ninth Fleet prepared a deep-sea landing team. Specialized submersible craft were readied in the Vanguard's bays. They would dive into the Pacific and follow the signal to its source. The fleet drifted over Earth's dark oceans. The whispering in the comms grew clearer, and now it was no longer just names. It was saying something else. A single phrase, repeated again and again in perfect, calm human speech. "Welcome home." The Pacific Ocean stretched below like a sheet of black glass. The Ninth Fleet floated high above it, their ships casting long shadows across the waves. Far below, the water hid the source of the signal, the thing that had been calling their names. Admiral Kane stood in the Vanguard's launch bay, watching the final checks on the submersible craft. They were small, armored spheres designed for extreme depths, each with reinforced glass viewports and powerful floodlights. Even so, the engineers worked nervously, as if they knew the machines might not be enough. The dive teams were made up of Marines, engineers, and scientists. They wore deep-sea pressure suits with built-in comms. Each one carried a short rifle, though everyone knew bullets would be useless if something truly alien waited for them. "Signal still steady?" Kane asked over his comm. The comms officer replied from the bridge, "Yes, sir, it's stronger now, almost excited." The word sent a cold feeling down Kane's spine. He gave the order to launch. The submersibles slid into the water with barely a splash. The view from inside quickly turned from blue to deep green, then to black. Floodlights cut narrow beams through. The darkness, illuminating drifting particles and the occasional flicker of deep-sea creatures. For the first 1,000 meters, there was nothing unusual. Just endless dark water pressing in on all sides. But as they passed 2 miles down, the ocean floor came into view, and it was not natural. The seabed was covered in vast, smooth slabs of metal, each the size of a city block. They were arranged in a perfect pattern, like tiles in a floor. Strange, glowing symbols ran along their edges, symbols no one recognized. The readings showed the metal was impossibly old, older than Earth's recorded history. At the center of the pattern was a circular structure, a massive door built into the ocean floor. It was hundreds of meters across and covered in the same glowing markings. The signal was coming from directly beneath it. "This isn't human," whispered Dr. Wren, the lead scientist. "This is ancient, very ancient." The Marines guided, the submersibles closer. As they approached the door, the whispering in the comms grew louder. It no longer sounded distant. It was as if the voice was speaking directly into their ears. One of the engineers frowned at his display. "Admiral, the symbols are changing." Kane leaned forward in his seat. The glowing lines on the door were shifting, rearranging themselves into words, human words. They formed a single phrase: "We remember you." Before anyone could speak, the ocean floor began to tremble. The massive door split down the middle, releasing a cloud of pale mist that drifted upward like breath from a giant mouth. From the darkness below came a deep, slow thump, the heartbeat. The submersible's floodlights reached into the opening, but the space beyond seemed endless. Somewhere far below, shapes moved. They were too big to be fish, too smooth to be rock. Dr. Wren's voice shook. "This isn't a building. It's a prison." Kane turned toward him. "For what?" Wren didn't answer. He just kept staring into the dark hole. The whispering grew so loud that some of the crew clutched their helmets. It was no longer in broken words. It was speaking clearly now, in dozens of human voices all at once. "Come down. Come home." Against the protests of half his officers, Kane gave the order. The submersibles began their descent into the opening. As the light from the surface faded completely, the walls around them became visible. Enormous black structures lined with impossible machinery, still running after unknown ages. The air inside was breathable, according to their sensors, though they were still far underwater. Gravity felt different here, heavier, and then they saw the first movement. Something slid along the wall, tall, thin, and impossibly fast. It left no wake in the water. Another shape followed, keeping pace with the submersibles. The floodlights caught glimpses of long limbs and faces that looked almost human, but wrong in ways the mind refused to understand. One of the Marines whispered, "Those aren't aliens. They look like—" His voice cut out as the submersibles' lights flickered. When they came back on, the shapes were gone. The descent continued. By the time they reached the bottom, the signal was deafening. They emerged into a vast chamber, a cavern so huge it could have swallowed a city. In its center stood a single black gate, pulsing with dim light. The heartbeat came from behind it. Kane stared at it through the viewport. Whatever was behind, that gate was the reason Earth was empty, and it was awake. The cavern was silent except for the steady thump, thump, thump of the heartbeat behind the black gate. The sound vibrated through the metal of the submersibles, rattling bolts and tools inside. No one spoke. No one wanted to be the first. To break the silence, Admiral Kane's hands tightened around the controls. He didn't know if they were about to witness history or the end of it. Dr. Wren's voice was quiet but urgent. "The readings are spiking. The gate is reacting to us." The black surface of the gate began to shimmer like oil. Light rippled across it, forming strange shapes that seemed to twist and stretch the longer you looked at them. The glowing symbols around its frame started to pulse, faster and faster, like a racing heartbeat. Then, a sound. Not metal grinding, not stone breaking. It was a slow, deep crack, as if something was splitting reality itself. The gate began to open. 2. Massive panels slid apart with unnatural smoothness, revealing a darkness far deeper than the chamber itself. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was as if the space beyond had swallowed every star in existence. And from that darkness came a wind, a cold, dry wind, even though they were still far beneath the ocean. One of the Marines swore, softly. "It's breathing." The whispering returned, louder than ever. But now it wasn't dozens of voices. It was millions. They spoke in perfect unison. "We remember. We are hungry." Kane's pulse quickened. "Seal it back," he ordered. "Now!" But the machinery that had opened the gate ignored every command. The ancient systems were working on their own, and the opening was still widening. Shapes began to emerge. They were tall, far taller than any human, with long limbs and pale, smooth skin that reflected no light. Their faces were almost human, but their eyes were pure black, and their mouths were too wide, stretching in unnatural smiles. The first one stepped through the gate. Its movement was slow and deliberate, but every step seemed to cover impossible distance. It bent low, pressing its face to the glass of Kane's submersible, and whispered without sound. Kane heard it inside his head. "You left us here." The Marines opened fire. Bullets tore through the water, hitting the creature's body. But it didn't bleed. It didn't even flinch. It simply turned its head toward the nearest submersible and placed its hand against the glass. The reinforced viewport began to warp and bubble as if it were melting. "Pull back!" Kane shouted. "All units, retreat to surface!" But even as they began to rise, more shapes were stepping through the gate. 10, 20, hundreds. Then came the worst sound yet, the heartbeat changing. It was no longer slow and steady. It was faster, excited. Dr. Wren stared at his readings. His voice was barely a whisper. "That wasn't the real one. Those are just fragments. What's behind the gate is much bigger." The light inside the gate flared, flooding the chamber with blinding white. The water boiled. Alarms screamed in every submersible. And in that final instant before systems failed, Kane realized the gate wasn't just opening here. It was opening everywhere. The ocean above the gate began to churn. Waves rose in unnatural patterns, colliding against each other in violent bursts. The sky, once calm, turned a deep, bruised gray. Lightning flashed without thunder, stabbing the clouds like silent blades. On the surface, the ships of the Ninth Fleet floated in uneasy formation. They had no idea what was happening far below. They only knew that the water beneath them was no longer still. Commander Harlow, stationed on the destroyer Iron Reach, felt the vibration first. It came through the metal under his boots, a slow rhythm that didn't match the sea's movement. It was the same heartbeat Admiral Kane had heard below, only now it was powerful enough to shake a ship the size of a small city. "Report!" Harlow barked, but no one answered immediately. The crew was staring over the rails, eyes wide. Something was rising from the deep. The first thing to break the surface was not a creature. It was a column of black water. It shot straight up into the air like a geyser, higher than any mast, higher even than the carrier's tower. And within that water were shapes. Long, pale, moving in ways that made the stomach twist. Harlow's radio crackled with Kane's voice, distorted by interference. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. They are not human." But it was already too late. From the dark sea, the pale shapes leapt. They moved with impossible speed, landing on decks without splashes. Their feet made no sound on the metal. Their black eyes scanned every human in sight, as if studying prey. One of them stepped toward a Marine. It leaned close, its mouth curling into that same wrong smile. Then, without touching him, the Marine collapsed. His body was whole, but His eyes were empty. Panic erupted. Guns fired. The air filled with the roar of machine cannons and the scream of alarms. The creatures didn't dodge or hide. They simply walked forward, ignoring the bullets as if they were raindrops. Everywhere they stepped, the metal of the ships warped, bending like soft clay. Above them, the clouds split. A beam of cold white light shone down from the sky. But it was not the sun. It was the gate's light, reaching up from below, cutting through the ocean and spilling into the heavens. Dr. Wren's voice came over the comms from the submersible. "Admiral, it's not just here. The readings are everywhere, gates, dozens of them, all opening." Kane's blood ran cold. If that was true, then Earth was no longer facing a single threat in one location. This was a global breach. And the Ninth Fleet was only the first to see it. On the deck of the Iron Reach, Harlow steadied himself against the rail as the ocean around them began to sink. A massive whirlpool forming where the black water had erupted. From its center, something huge was coming, something far larger than the Pale Hunters. The last thing Harlow saw before the deck tilted under him was a massive, jagged hand, as long as the destroyer itself, rising from the deep. The fingers clawed at the air, each tipped with talons of black stone. The water boiled where it touched. The awakening had begun, and the Ninth Fleet was already surrounded. The whirlpool widened until it swallowed the horizon. Every ship of the Ninth Fleet was caught in its pull, their engines straining, their hulls groaning under the pressure. Sailors clung to rails as waves crashed over the decks, dragging equipment, and even people toward the center. From the heart of the vortex, the massive hand rose higher. It wasn't flesh, it wasn't metal. It was something in between. A black, jagged surface that shifted like molten rock, yet moved like living muscle. Steam poured off it, hissing as seawater boiled away from its touch. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Titan's wake, the flagship, his knuckles white against the railing. He had seen war. He had seen alien weapons that could split mountains. But this was older than any technology. This was something that belonged to the deep places of the universe. Through the radio, Harlow's voice came in ragged bursts. "Admiral, it's not just a hand, it's pulling itself up." The water exploded upward again, and the shape that followed was far worse than the hand. A towering body emerged, covered in jagged ridges and glowing cracks of pale light. Its head was not like any creature of Earth, long, with no mouth, only rows of dark pits where a face should be. And yet, somehow, Kane felt it staring directly at him. The fleet opened fire. Missiles streaked into the air, cannons thundered, and the sky lit with explosions. But when the smoke cleared, the creature stood untouched. The Pale Hunters swarmed over the decks, stopping any sailor from reloading or aiming again. Dr. Wren's voice broke through the chaos. "It's not attacking yet. It's looking for something." Kane's mind raced. If it was looking, it meant the creature had a purpose. And if it had a purpose, maybe they could survive if they stayed out of its way. But the hunters weren't letting anyone go. One by one, the ships were being locked down, their crews collapsing under some invisible force. The sea heaved again, and this time the creature's other hand broke the surface. It gripped the edge of the whirlpool, pulling more of its body into the world. The water around it frothed red, not from blood, but from the sheer heat it radiated. Kane knew what would happen if that thing fully emerged. The ocean itself would not be able to contain it. Earth's coasts, maybe even entire cities, could be gone in hours. He grabbed the comm. "All ships, prepare for emergency submersion. Get below the surface, now. That's an order." Harlow's voice came back, strained. "Sir, with respect, if we go down there, we might not come back up." Kane's eyes stayed locked on the creature. "If we stay up here, we won't have the chance." As the fleet began to dive, the creature moved for the first time. It leaned forward, placing its hand flat on the surface of the water. and the sea went still around it. The whirlpool stopped. The waves calmed. Even the wind died, and then, in a voice that was not a sound but a vibration in every bone, it spoke. Not in human language, not in any alien tongue Kane had heard, but somehow the meaning was clear. Where is the door? The Ninth Fleet floated in unnatural silence. The ocean, moments ago raging like a beast, was now as still as glass. The creature's hand pressed against the water's surface, as if it were solid ground, and its eyeless head tilted toward the flagship. Admiral Kane's throat was dry. Every instinct screamed at him to fire, to run, to do something. But the pale hunters stood on every deck, still as statues, their empty faces turned toward the sailors. No one dared move. The voice came again, not through the air, but inside their bones. Where is the door? Dr. Wren stood at the railing, her hands trembling. It's not talking about a ship's door, she whispered. Kane glanced at her sharply. Then what? Wren swallowed hard. Legends, deep ocean myths. They speak of the door beneath, a gate that leads far beyond this world. Some say it was sealed before life began. Kane's eyes narrowed. And this thing wants it opened? Wren nodded. If it's what I think, opening it could destroy everything. From across the fleet, Captain Harlow's voice crackled through the comms. Admiral, I think it's searching our minds. I saw something. Images. An old ruin. Not here. Not in the water. On land. Somewhere near the equator. The creature shifted, its immense frame sending ripples across the still water. It spoke again, this time sharper, impatient. The door. Give the key. Kane's blood ran cold. If it knew about the location, it might head straight for the coast. And if it had a key, or could make one. Suddenly, one of the pale hunters moved. It stepped toward a young sailor on the Titan's wake. The sailor froze, his eyes wide in terror, but the hunter simply touched his forehead with one long finger. The boy gasped, and then began to speak in a strange, broken tone. The key lies in the heart of your stone, the mountain that drinks the sun. Dr. Wren's eyes widened. That's Mount Solara, in the equator belt, a dormant volcano, or so we thought. Kane cursed under his breath. Now it all made sense. The creature wasn't trapped here by the sea. It had followed something to Earth. And whatever was, under Mount Solara was important enough for it to drag an entire fleet into the deep to demand answers. The pale hunter released the sailor, who collapsed in exhaustion. The creature began to sink back into the water, but its voice thundered one last time in their minds. Bring me the key, or your oceans will burn. The whirlpool returned in an instant, but this time it did not pull them down. It pushed them away. The ships were flung outward, scattering across miles of calm sea, as if the creature had grown bored of holding them. Kane steadied himself, gripping the console. The fleet was battered, half their systems fried, but they were alive. And now, they had a new mission. Find the key before the creature did, or Earth was finished. The Ninth Fleet pushed through the calm sea like hunted prey. Every engine roared at maximum, the ships limping but refusing to slow. The monster's words, still, echoed in their minds. Bring me the key, or your oceans will burn. Admiral Kane stood at the bridge, staring at the horizon. Ahead lay weeks of travel to Mount Solara, but he knew they didn't have that kind of time. If the creature could send hunters onto their decks without warning, then it could also send them ahead. They were already late. Dr. Wren worked without rest, scanning old maps and deep-sea surveys. She found something strange. Admiral, look at this. Mount Solara isn't just a volcano. There's an ancient structure inside it. Something not made by humans. Kane frowned. Alien? Wren shook her head. Older. Her words chilled. The entire bridge. Older than aliens. Older than humans. And now something was demanding they open it. Hours later, the radar screamed. 3 fast-moving contacts were closing in. Kane's blood boiled when he saw the signatures. They weren't alien ships. They were human. Fleet markings. But not Earth's. These were from the outer colonies, the breakaway human territories beyond Mars. If they were here, it meant only one thing. The creature had spoken to them too. The comms crackled with a voice. Kane knew all too well. Commodore Elric Voss, leader of the Colonial Guard. Kane, you're in our waters. Stand down. We're taking the artifact. Kane's jaw clenched. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Voss. Oh, I do, Voss replied calmly. And I know what it's worth. With the key, we control the door. We control everything, Wren whispered almost to herself. If they open it for power, they'll kill us all. The colonial ships accelerated, cutting through the waves like blades. Kane gave the order without hesitation. Full speed to Solara. Prepare defensive fire. The fleet surged forward. Rain began to fall, lightning flashing in the distance as if the world itself knew what was coming. Behind them, the pale hunter's words whispered on the wind. The key. The door. The deep. Kane didn't know who would reach the volcano first. The Ninth Fleet, the colonies, or something worse. But he knew one thing. This was no longer just a mission. It was a race against extinction. The sea boiled as the Ninth Fleet neared Mount Solara. The black shape of the volcano rose from the ocean like a giant's shoulder, its peak lost in dark clouds. Lightning flashed again and again, painting the sky in white light. Every wave seemed to pull them closer, as if the mountain itself was calling them. Admiral Kane stood at the bow, feeling the ship tremble under the strain of full power. Behind them, the Colonial Guard was closing in fast, their guns already aimed. Above, dark shadows circled in the storm clouds, shapes too big to be birds. Dr. Wren ran onto the deck, her voice breaking through the roar of the wind. Admiral! The structure inside the volcano, it's not just a door, it's a seal. Something is trapped under this mountain. Kane turned sharply. Trapped? Wren nodded, her face pale. If the seal opens, it won't just be us who die. The whole ocean will turn into fire. Kane's stomach turned cold. He now knew why the pale hunters had whispered about the deep. They weren't looking for the key to claim power. They were looking for the key to set something free. Before Kane could answer, the first colonial shells exploded in the water nearby. Columns of spray shot into the air, drenching the fleet. The Ninth Fleet's gunners fired back, the ocean between them lit with flashes of cannon fire. Shrapnel screamed through the wind. Both sides pushed forward, neither willing to stop. And then the volcano spoke. It started with a deep rumble under the water. The waves began to spin, forming massive whirlpools. The sky above the volcano split open with a blinding beam of light, shooting straight into the clouds. The mountain was waking up. Wren's voice came through the comms, panicked. The seal is breaking! It's reacting to both fleets being here! Kane shouted orders, but the sound of the sea drowned him out. Giant cracks split the volcanoes, slope, pouring rivers of glowing lava into the ocean. The water hissed and turned to steam. Through the steam, Kane saw it. A massive circular gate carved into the volcano's heart. It was opening. From the storm above, the pale hunters descended, landing on both fleets without care for sides. Colonial soldiers and Earth sailors screamed as the creatures cut through them, black spears dripping with salt water. They didn't care who had the key. They only cared that the door would open. Kane grabbed his rifle and fired into the nearest hunter, the shot tearing half its head away. But even as it fell, more came. The sky, the sea, the mountain, all of it felt alive, and all of it wanted the same thing: the key. By the time the first gate lock clicked open, the Ninth Fleet and the colonies were no longer fighting each other. They were fighting to survive. But Kane could see in Voss's eyes, even now the colonial leader still wanted the key for himself. The monster beneath the mountain was almost free, and humans were still too busy arguing over who would control it. The final lock gave way with a sound that shook the air. A deep, metallic clang echoed across the ocean, and the great stone gate of Mount Solara split apart. From the black opening inside, a cold wind rushed out, a wind that smelled of old salt, burnt metal, and something far worse. The sea stopped moving. Every wave froze in place, as if the water itself was holding its breath. The storm above went silent. For one strange heartbeat, the world waited. Then the ocean dropped. Every ship in the Ninth Fleet and the colonial armada tilted forward as the water pulled down into the mountain's heart. The volcano's crater was no longer just rock. It was a hole, a tunnel that led deep into the dark. From that tunnel came a sound. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a scream. It was a low, endless note, the sound of something so big, so ancient, that it did not care who heard it. The sound rattled bones, shook teeth, and made even the most hardened soldiers drop their weapons. Shapes moved inside the darkness. First, Kane thought it was the lava's reflection. Then he saw it was eyes, dozens, each the size of a warship's gun barrel, glowing faint green. They blinked, one by one, and the sea began to boil again. Dr. Wren whispered from the bridge, her voice shaking. "It's not a weapon. It's alive." The first tentacle broke the surface, bigger than the Ninth Fleet's largest destroyer. Its skin was covered in black plates like armor, each one scored with scars. The pale hunters screamed in joy and dove into the water, swimming toward the monster as if returning home. The thing beneath the waves rose higher, its bulk lifting the sea with it. Ships were thrown aside like toys. Some capsized instantly. Others were crushed under the pressure of the water being forced away. Kane shouted for the fleet to retreat, but Voss of the Colonials only laughed through the comms. "Do you see it, Kane? With this, no one can stop us!" His voice turned into static as his ship was lifted into the air by a single massive limb. The monster squeezed. The vessel exploded in a fireball. Lightning tore through the sky, revealing the thing's full head. It wasn't just an animal. It had a crown of bone, ridged and sharp, with markings that looked like writing. Old writing. Human writing. Wren's face went pale. "Admiral, we didn't make this. But humans have seen it before, long ago." The monster let out another sound, louder this time, and the sea heaved violently. Every ship, Earth or Colonial, was now running. None fired at each other anymore. They all fired at the thing. It didn't care. Kane gripped the railing as the wave lifted his flagship. They could not kill it. They could only close the gate. "Wren, can we seal it again?" "Only from inside, Admiral. Someone has to stay behind." Kane looked out at the fleets, at the men and women who still fought against the impossible. He knew what he had to do. The monster roared again, and the volcano shook. The Ninth Fleet would never come home, but maybe the rest of humanity still could.